All right, take it away.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm happy to go ahead and get started. Maybe there will be a couple stragglers that jump in here, but excited to see the group. Thanks so much, Robbie and Yana, for having me here today. Just to, I guess, give you guys, well, I will introduce myself. Maybe I'll start there and give you guys a little bit of background on who I am and help you to understand sort of the perspective and lens that I am bringing into our discussion here today. But as Robbie introduced, I am a MATSI BME alumni of CMU. I did my undergrad here at between 2007, 2011 is when I graduated. And at the time I was an undergrad, I definitely had aspirations to go on to my PhD. During my undergrad time, I did a lot of academic research, in and around my coursework. I, kind of prepared as one typically would, as if I was going to pursue this PhD trajectory. Um, and even went through with a whole slate of grad school applications and interviews and even had a roommate in Baltimore. I was on my way to Hopkins. But also concurrently throughout my undergrad career here, I kind of found myself continually quite curious and maybe like in a little bit of a different direction than most of my undergrad peers, I guess, my engineering sort of peers. I was just always really curious, not just about the subject matter that we were engineering or designing or optimizing, but also what happens after you build it? After you design this thing, how does it actually become real? How does it actually get in the hands of the people or the patients or the, organization that's going to use the, whatever the thing is that you ultimately engineered? I did spend some amount of my time well, really, I took all of my non-technical electives in business when I was at CMU. So I ended up getting a minor in business, and that process also exposed me to a really nice and interesting cross-section of campus at the time. Because when I was there in 2011, the Schwartz Center didn't exist. Hopefully, you guys have seen the Tepper building, the giant building on Forbes Avenue. That was a parking lot back in my day. Entrepreneurship and innovation in the way we think about it today really existed in the back corner of campus where the old business school used to be, the GSIA building, whatever they call it now, and off campus, actually up on Craig Street, where a thing called Project Olympus was housed. And there was nothing like the campus environment is today, where there's entrepreneurship and innovation kind of infused in everything. But despite that, I still sort of accidentally and very fortuitously found my way to a very entrepreneurial path where at the time I was graduating my undergrad in 2011, I actually sort of took the leap into starting a medical device startup company on my own, and actually grew out of my senior biomedical engineering design class project, decided to kind of take that leap into entrepreneurship. So just to give you guys a little bit of my like academic trajectory and then post CMU, as I mentioned, I started my career as the founder and CEO of a startup company, whatever that means. It was this logo here on the right called Activated Orthotics. That's a maybe a story that isn't going to be the subject matter for today, my own sort of startup story, but happy maybe even over a beer to share that with any of you who's interested in hearing more about that. But after my own startup experience, I spent a couple of years in different R&D kind of innovation aligned roles in different settings, different organizations. So after my startup was acquired by a medical equipment company where I went to create a new product R&D department within this existing company. So very, very similar subject matter to my own startup building really rehab devices for people with various musculoskeletal kind of orthopedic injuries and issues. but inside a very different context, inside a, a more mature corporate entity. I also spent a couple of years at UPMC Enterprises, which is the innovation and commercialization arm of UPMC. So hopefully that, large academic medical center you guys have seen in and around town everywhere. So another really interesting experience to work on innovation in healthcare, but inside a very, very different type of setting and different type of context. And then now today, my real role and focus and sort of purpose is all oriented as more a supporter of healthcare startups and healthcare innovators. My primary role is at an organization called LifeX. I'll give you the really quick, brief primer to LifeX in a second here, but basically, it's a startup supporting organization that helps specifically healthcare and life science startups kind of get off the ground, get started, and really off to the races to bringing the next medical innovations to life. But I also spend a little bit of my time at the Big Idea Center at Pitt, which is specifically the Student Entrepreneurship Center at Pitt, where I'm an entrepreneur in residence, where I, coach, guide, support student innovators, also trying to bring their, innovations and startups to life. So that is Kelly in a nutshell. I give you all that background so that you understand the lens that I'm coming at to share with you today. And what I aim to talk about, and what I think we teed up this discussion as, is pitching and communicating your innovation. What you don't see in my resume and my, formal roles here is I'm not a professional speaker. I'm not a professional, speak like pitching coach. I'm not even a, communications professional, but like throughout all of my, especially professional experience, this ability to effectively communicate what it is you're doing, why it matters to the audience that you're trying to convince, and kind of inviting some or many, I guess, constituents to join you in that journey and support your journey forward has just been a really critical, I think, key to success, regardless of what role or what organization I've been in. I think especially as it relates to communicating something new, something innovative, something that is, kind of off the beaten path or the typical trajectory. So, um, comments, questions, anything before I sort of keep diving in? All right. I hope to eventually elicit a little bit from you guys. I hope to be exciting and interesting enough that you'll want to jump in. I'll start asking you questions in a bit, so there will be a quiz later. Pay attention. So before I continue on, all things communication, just to give you like the super quick primer, high level spiel on what LifeX is, I mentioned it's this startup supporting organization that really provides a suite of programs and resources aimed at supporting life sciences and med tech startups from inception, from the point where they're, maybe still in an academic research lab, off into moving into a real commercial launch. So really interesting cross section of working alongside many different startup companies throughout that life cycle. And there's a couple kind of core pillars to what we do. So obviously the anchor and the core of what we do really is specifically startup support. So that's programming, accelerator, incubator type programming, as well as early stage funding. But we also have programs aimed at talent development. So this is both kind of more educational and immersive opportunities for whether it's students in internships or even more mature professionals looking to engage in and support the startups in our community. So we also do a lot of work and have a lot of programs and resources oriented at that. And then we're also kind of positioned as this hub to the life science ecosystem, particularly here in and around Pittsburgh. A lot of events that convene the local community around life science entrepreneurship, um, other programs and events really to support this, building a robust community here. So that's LifeX in a nutshell, just so you leave here today having heard of LifeX and you have a little bit of a sense of what we do. And if you're interested, I will sort of, give a call out at the end of my talk and where and how you might engage with me or LifeX moving forward. But you're also welcome to reach out to me if you want to talk more about LifeX, because that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're really going to talk about really this process of innovation. And I'm excited to see that, throughout this seminar series, you guys have, gotten a lot of different views and a lot of different lenses on different aspects of bringing a medical device innovation to life. Um, a lot of the nuts and bolts of the product development and the prototyping and how do you think about regulatory and pathways moving forward. Um, and I don't know if I'm proud to say, or I guess I'm happy to admit that when I was a naive 21-year-old entrepreneur, this is what I thought my path was going to be. I'm an engineering student. I built a thing, check mark. We filed for a patent. It's not granted yet, but the process is, I mean, it is now today, but in 2011 terms, it wasn't. Process is underway. Like, we're going to get this patent granted, check mark. And then, like, the money starts flowing, right? Like, that was my understanding and idea of how the innovation process and the process of getting a medical device to market, that's how I thought that process should happen. Before I continue on and tell you what I learned and some of my lessons and how accurate or not my expectations were, I'd love to kind of probe and poke at any of you out there listening. If you can put in the chat, or if anyone does want to come off mute, I'd love to hear just to have a sense of who's in the audience and what you might be thinking about. If any of you are working on some sort of innovative project that you think might have an entrepreneurial trajectory or might have a pathway towards commercialization, whether it's something you're working on in academic research or for a class project or just on your own. If anybody has a project they're working on, if you want to drop a, little blurb or a little description in the chat, I'd love to see and hear anything that you guys are working on. Maybe leave the call out there.
I'm
No?
sure there will be a few, but they're maybe just
Yes.
typing.
Yes. Yes. Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm currently working on a flexible near-infrared spectroscopy device. It's basically going to be able to um, detect hemodynamic changes. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a product I'm building currently.
Awesome. And that's with a research group at CMU.
Yes, this is actually with Yana.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. Well, you're in good hands, and she knows when and where to find me when we can be helpful. Yeah, if anybody else wants to drop in the chat, feel free. I will, keep an eye out for anything you guys put in there because it'll help me maybe draw on some examples or some parallels as we go through our talk. So if anybody is in the process of typing, please keep at it. Um, the first thing I learned in on my own journey into entrepreneurship, pivoting, from an engineering background, thinking a lot about the product and sort of the technical requirements and the prototyping and all of those very tactical details of building a product. One of the very first stark lessons I learned is that innovation is really a people business at its core. Like, yes, you need the science to work. You need to be solving a real problem. You need to offer a solution that is truly effectively addressing that problem in the most impactful way. But the only way that you're able to, bring that product to life, move that solution forward to get it into the hands of the people that can eventually benefit from it, you'll need investors to believe in you enough to fund your project. You'll need collaborators and employees that are inspired enough to join you and join in support of whatever it is you're building. Eventually, you'll need customers who actually buy into the idea that, your product or your solution is the future. And all of that really comes down to being able to communicate the science, communicate the technical details, but also like inspire the real world human people that have real world human emotions and make decisions for all the perfectly imperfect reasons that humans make decisions or take action. You need to really communicate to, people. I don't believe AI has overturned that part of the innovation process at this point. So, all that to say, and maybe put a footnote here on how important it is that even if the science works, even if the technology is novel and incredible, and your patent is the best thing under the sun, even if all the technical details check out, the only way any of this stuff can really become real is with a whole lot of support and buy-in from a whole lot of people. Being able to effectively communicate and convince those people is really, really key.
And we have
So,
someone in the chat
oh
saying
yeah.
she's working on commercializing a novel, non-invasive stimulation device and also works with an accessible EEG company. And says with stimulation device is working with Vishal, who you know.
Yes, I do know Vishal. Hi, good to
Yeah,
see
okay.
you. Awesome. Okay, cool. Hi,
Ah,
Vishal.
Vishal
Hi,
is here.
Kendra.
Hi.
Awesome. Yeah, so glad to hear that there are a couple of familiar faces and names in the group here. And I know you're actively thinking about how do I use maybe some of these nuggets in the next pitch you're gearing up for. So, I think for those of you that do have a tangible project right now that yes maybe is still in research but you're starting to gear up towards your thinking forward to commercialization, and even if some of you don't or aren't working on something that's that you know on that much of a tangible trajectory to commercialization, still important that you listen and pay attention because what I'm not talking about today is exclusively related to investor pitching. I think a lot of people, when they hear pitch, they think like Shark Tank investors, and maybe you feel like that's not super relevant to what I'm working on today. But I will maybe push back on that or maybe suggest that this is relevant to all of you because every pitch in various contexts is another opportunity for you to gain believers and supporters in whatever it is you're doing. Even if the next step isn't necessarily investment, as I mentioned earlier, maybe the next step is an important collaboration partner. Maybe it's a co-applicant on a really important grant that helps you, take that next leap ahead to whatever it is you're developing. And a pitch doesn't always have to be a super formal, structured, stodgy feeling thing. I mean, I'll say what I'm doing right here, right now. Maybe some of you would think of it as a pitch. I think of it more as a conversation and a discussion, but still kind of falls in this bucket of every opportunity you get to kind of share your idea, share your message is another opportunity to sort of win favor and win supporters of people who can ultimately really bolster and move forward along whatever it is that you're working on. So how I would recommend you all, think about approaching any given upcoming pitch, presentation, opportunity to convey your message. First and foremost, I think it's important that you start with really knowing and thinking through what even is your objective. again, like I said, it's not always every pitch isn't to get investment dollars. You might have a presentation somewhere that's a little more casual. Maybe, you were invited to talk about your research somewhere rather than you saying, can I get in the room and pitch my idea? But when are presented with these opportunities, I think it's super, super valuable to, take a second before you craft your presentation or whatever it is. Just think through, how can I use this opportunity to move whatever it is forward, right? Um, are there people in the audience that you can capture some really valuable feedback or perspective from? Are there people in the audience that you want to arm with the knowledge about what you're doing so that they can, spread the word, spread the message, make a really important introduction or opportunity for you? Whatever the context is, it could come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but really put some thought up front into what is this an opportunity? How can I turn this into an opportunity to, advance my message and advance my mission? Number two is to really understand the audience that you're presenting to. You guys in this context, I think a lot of you are students, but maybe you spend a lot of time presenting to more technical, scientific, engineering types of audiences. And yes, those people probably enjoy hearing a lot about the technical and a lot about the science, also go into that presentation already having a really high proficiency for whatever the, subject matter is. But that's not every room that you're going to present in. And it's really important to kind of tailor your communication to the audience that you're speaking to and the objective that you want to get out of that pitch or out of that presentation, whatever the opportunity arises. And honestly, sometimes you end up pitching and presenting into rooms that have very mixed audiences. So you're speaking to a bunch of people that have different set points that are coming in with different backgrounds and experiences listening to whatever you're explaining. And it just requires a good amount of thought and awareness and understanding of who is it that I am even trying to speak to, and what is the level of depth and detail that, speaks to where they're at, and also, number one, helps me accomplish my objective. And then third, maybe like the most overlooked, but in some ways maybe the most important, is to think about crafting your pitch or presentation to speak to your audience in terms of that really aligns well with what they want or what they're motivated by. I think it's a big misconception. Like, people go into pitches and they think about pitching like, I'm pitching because I'm asking for money or I am selling a product. Like, that's my pitch. But as you craft any sort of pitch, I think the most productive way to approach crafting your story, conveying your message is really through this lens of what is the opportunity that I am presenting to this audience? For example, if you're speaking to investors, it's not, hey, investor, give me money. You're presenting to them with the opportunity to get a return on their investment through the success of your startup company. Uh, if you're if you're pitching a collaborator, or maybe if you're pitching a customer, you're not begging for them to buy your product. You're presenting them an opportunity to solve, something that is probably a very critical problem for them, in a way that is, valuable, impactive, effective for their business or for their need, right? And you'd want to tailor and craft your message that really speaks to that. You probably don't need to educate the customer so much on what the problem is. You might really just need to educate them and lean into why your particular solution, why your particular approach is, valuable above and beyond the rest or the alternatives. Um, similarly with a collaborator, you're basically pitching them an opportunity to work with you in, creating a new future that can be. So, thinking about crafting your pitch, number one, being really clear on what you want to get out of that opportunity. Every opportunity to get in front of people is a value. So make sure you think thoughtfully about the value that you can gain from it, understand who you're speaking to, and then importantly, what motivates them? What is really going to resonate with them and get them excited about getting involved? Before I continue on, any particular questions or comments to add on my recommendations for reveling and making the most of any and every opportunity you have to pitch your ideas?
I have a question.
Sure.
How would you assess that your audience, like, kind of has the sufficient background information to understand your pitch?
Yeah, so couple layers there. And number one, if anything you can do to find out about who the audience is before you go into any given pitch is helpful, right? So I think Robbie and Yana know, for example, me coming into this course, I've asked them who usually is the audience. Hey, Robbie, can you tell me what they've already heard about? So I know as a bit of a background, like the perception that you guys are coming into this talk with. So number one, you can kind of ask whoever is coordinating or organized or asked you to present. That isn't always, A, that's not always doable. B, sometimes it's a little opaque or unknown. Like
Mhm.
you're presenting somewhere and it's a bit of a more public audience and you don't actually know who's going to be in the room. And at that point, it is a little bit of I don't want to say like a total guess, but you kind of hedge on like what do you think is the least common denominator, if especially if you're expecting a mixed audience, right? You're going to have some people who are highly scientific, some people who are not scientific at all, some people who like never took a science class a day in their life, whatever. But you can kind of tailor and tune your message to you know, a more general audience level.
Mhm.
And I think it actually also goes back to the first point here. Like, what is the objective? Is your objective to teach an audience something like about new science? Is your objective to just get them to buy in and believe in what you're doing because they can be an important supporter of what you're doing? If that's the case, like maybe you're lighter on the science and you're like, hey, trust me, I'm a master's student or a PhD student at CMU. I know the science, I know what I'm talking about. Like that can be a tactic and you can, right? So I think it also goes back to the objective of, do you really need everybody to know everything about the science? Maybe yes, like if it's your, PhD defense committee, then like, yes, probably you do. But not in every situation. And honestly, sometimes that's perfectly fine.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I maybe add something to this? And
Sure.
just say it's like for everyone who is in the audience right now, it's like in a way you can think of the seminar today as well as an opportunity for you to pitch to Kelly. Not because Kelly is going to give you money, but Kelly has amazing resources especially within the Pittsburgh region. So like if you wanted to ask yourself of like, okay, what can you get out of asking questions and pitching in the sense of just asking for opportunities is like, well, what connections does Kelly have? What
Yeah.
knowledge does she have that could help you start a company or think about starting a company or getting introduced to other people? So, like, in a way, to rephrase what Kelly said, it's like every pitch is an opportunity to get resources.
Yes.
Um, So ask your questions.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah, so keep it coming. Feel free to drop questions in the chat, do the raise your hand thing, just come off mute and be like, "Hey, I have a question." Even if like even don't be shy to interrupt me, okay? I'd rather hear your question than me just kind of blathering on. So, the second important lesson I learned in my, entrepreneurial journey, and honestly, that I relearn and relearn and relearn in working with so many entrepreneurs. Particularly, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs that come from technical backgrounds, right? Like it's literally you guys, it's, literally Vishal. This is why I know Vishal, right? But it's literally you guys, biomedical engineering students, PhDs, postdocs, academics, faculty members that have developed this really incredible research and see the opportunity for it. And I see so many people tell the story of their invention or try to tell the story of their invention in a very like, here are some facts about science, which is great if you're trying to educate people on science. But what really resonates and excites people to take action and to get involved and to be one of these supporters and champions that's going to help push you forward, it is playing into more of that like you're speaking to humans that are inspired by real like regular human emotions, and humans respond to stories, right? Like there was the typical like hero arc, like there is a beginning, a middle, and end, and the hero goes on a journey. So think about your pitches about like you're telling a story, right? Like what is the story you want to tell that is exciting and engaging to any audience you might want to tell it to. And I've kind of sketched out here my recommended kind of just like fundamental story arc that I like to advise entrepreneurs and innovators to try to package up what it is they're working on. And I do like to recommend that you really start with just writing out your narrative in like a bulleted list or in like text in prose before you go to like slides. So what I'm showing you on the screen here right now is not necessarily Kelly Collier's recommendation for the 6 slides you should have in your pitch deck. It's not that, okay? So please don't quote me on that. What I'm recommending here is like this is the structure of a narrative you want to tell, a storyline that is going to help an audience follow what it is you're working on, why it matters, and why you're going to be the one to, bring this incredible innovation to life. So I'll talk through each of these points. And how you can kind of use this structure, how you can think about it is yes, start by maybe just sketching out the bullet points of how you would explain each of these components. You can then turn those bullet points into a pitch deck, right? Figure out which pieces of that story should belong on different slides. You can add visuals, you can add statistics, you can add whatever you want. Not necessarily that each of these bullets is its own slide, but you can also kind of use this same storyline structure to even craft like a 60 to 90-second elevator pitch, like the really short summary explanation of what it is you're working on. So, but like these are what I generally consider as like the really critical components of telling the story. And then there's maybe some other stuff we'll see on the next slide, other parts and pieces that can come into play depending on who you're talking to, what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah,
Um,
we just had
yeah,
Vishal in the chat asked about
yep,
insights on things to highlight in different types of pitches, elevator slash
yes,
sales slash investor pitches. It sounds like that's
yeah,
something you're going to go into.
yep, yes. That's perfect. As I kind of talk through this, I will try to call out like how you might tune to one thing or another. Um, So, it's hard to start anywhere other than explaining the problem that you're even solving. Sometimes you see people try to do something really creative, but I don't know, 99% of the time, your pitch or narrative is going to start by explaining the problem that you're addressing. And, you guys often working in healthcare aligned, subject matter, you're, you have to keep in mind you're not always only telling the audience the clinical problem, like heart disease is a problem. A lot of times, especially who you're speaking to, Vishal, like calling out your question here, you're speaking to an investor, for example. You also want to call out, well, heart disease is hard to diagnose because, or it's hard to treat because, or uh, patient compliance with treatments are, unideal or hard to access or whatever. Like, tell us about the problem behind the problem that actually impacts not just clinical outcomes, but the operations of some healthcare business, right? Like the financial operations of a hospital or right? Like a clinician's practice or an insurance company. Like help us understand not just that like cancer is killing people, heart disease is killing people and whatnot, but what are the layers of the problem behind the problem? And that's heart disease is a problem because it becomes massively expensive for, the self-insured employer who is bearing the cost for this patient who is, approaching heart failure or something like that. So just to call out like problem, super important to call out, not just like the scary statistics that relate to human health, but also the real world impacts and often business impacts behind the scenes of what's going on with that problem. Also, often coupled, probably part of your explanation of the problem, you'll want to make sure you call out to some level of specificity the stakeholders. Again, you guys working in healthcare, it's often really important that you kind of name and clarify the different stakeholders and how they experience and feel that problem differently. Um, like the patient, it's usually obvious, like they're the ones that are experiencing a health problem that leads to lower quality of life. But there is also a clinician who is probably the most critical decision maker that's deciding whether to use your novel life-saving technology or the current standard of care. It's important to kind of explain, especially in an investor type of audience. And I say investor because customers, you're probably speaking to the physician who has the problem. You don't have to teach him that he has a problem. But investors, they're not cardiologists, right? They probably need to understand more layers to that, how each stakeholder experiences the pain and the problem that's at the core of what you're trying to solve. And importantly, like not just that they have the problem, but like why are they motivated to solve it? This sounds really obvious, but I hear so many pitches and so many entrepreneurs present to me like a de facto problem. Like, I have a problem with the weather. It's cold and it's wet and it's gross outside. But honestly, I'm not motivated to solve it. I could move. I could leave Pittsburgh and I could go I could go to Southern California and that solves my weather problem. But honestly, I'm just not that motivated to solve it. So, like, I think that's a piece often that people can miss in explaining the problem and the sort of the stakeholders involved in that problem. Not just that it's an inconvenience, not just that it's like, this is something that's an unideal state, but how do you really know that they're motivated to solve it? They're eager to solve it. It's this urgent problem that they really want to have addressed. So that's a really important part of creating a compelling narrative. Uh,
Um,
yes.
Related to that, we have a question in the chat about the difference between a good scientific narrative and a fundable commercial narrative, especially for technology that is at an algorithm-heavy stage.
So actually, I might get into that. Maybe I'll kind of allude to that in these next couple of bullet points.
Sure.
And I have maybe on my next slide, I have a couple of the outside of the core story arc, the other things you might want to hit on, depending on if you are seeking like a fundable, like an investor kind of pitch.
Also, it is
So
3:45.
oh my goodness. Remember when I said we aren't going to chit chat that long?
Yep.
No, I'll keep moving forward. Okay. So, I think where you guys usually do really well is the solution, this incredible thing that you've created. You usually have all the scientific, you know, data and traction and evidence that it's going to work, that it's really unique. The value proposition, though, this is something that kind of maybe gets more at that, like, what is a fundable commercial narrative? Not just that, what this solution addresses heart disease, but this creates significant value to the doctor that's prescribing it, the hospital that is choosing to deploy this intervention, the insurance company that is responsible, largely bearing the cost for clinical interventions. That is really the biggest lever in something that's like very cool and important science that can advance human health and something that is truly commercially viable. I'll kind of touch on this on the next slide, but you know, there's kind of sub bullets under value proposition, which is really about your business model. Okay, so after you can make a point that the doctor, the hospital, the insurance company, like everybody involved will gain significant value out of the thing, the solution that you're delivering, then you get to draw the line and say, because they're gaining so much value, that means they will pay for it. Here's why and how. So that kind of gets to this question around like, there's good science that usually is in that, like, here's a problem, here's a technology solution. But the magic lever that really pivots to, is this something truly commercially viable, investable, really has to do with there's significant enough value created by the people that can actually pay for it. And sorry to everyone, but it usually isn't the patient. So if all of the value is delivered only to the patient, usually they will have a hard time paying enough for whatever the thing is that you're providing. All right, competitors, real quick. I mean, this one is pretty self-explanatory, but after you've just shared with us, how your novel solution is going to solve this really important problem, then also you want to position it against who else is trying to solve this problem and why did they miss the mark? And maybe going into my last bullet point, like, why are you and your team, why are you going to succeed where others have failed, right? What is it about you, your knowledge, your access, your technology, and this current moment in time? Why does all that sort of culminate into this really, important opportunity? So also in your pitch, do not miss the opportunity to pitch yourself, right? Like, you guys are impressive, knowledgeable, like brilliant people that are such an important part of bringing, these innovations to life. Don't don't forget, like, that is not the point. There's lots of places where you want to be humble, but it's not at that point. You want to not miss the opportunity to pitch yourself. So, a couple other, what I presented on the last slide, like, that should be the backbone of your story. There's a bunch of other things here that do really get more to this. If you're really pitching and in like a more investor style pitch, market size is super, super important, right? Like, in order for them to, get the return on investment out of the investment they might put in, there has to be a significant enough market size where like the math and the trajectory works out. regulatory reimbursement. There are certain audiences where, depending on what you're trying to convince them of, super important to include in your pitch. Um, your go-to-market strategy. This is like, if the science works and you build the product and you pass the FDA, then what is the strategy you're going to take to actually sell it, distribute it, get it, market it, get it adopted in the hands of the users? And then, of course, if you are raising money, how much money do you need? How are you going to use that money? How far will that money get you? Those are, and kind of coupled with that, the roadmap. What does the roadmap look like ahead? All pieces that are important, especially if you're pitching investors and maybe in some other, maybe pitch competitions, maybe some other cases. But none of this matters if you don't like really nail that core narrative. And then I guess this is like mostly my punchline here. Everything else I have in this talk is just like extra resources and wrapping up. Really, my punchline here is kind of the point that I started with of knowing the objective and the opportunity, and don't miss the opportunity to actually make an ask of your audience, right? And again, it can be it's not always, and please give me $1 million. Sometimes it could be, it's really important that we line up some clinical collaborators. So if anybody knows any, endocrinologists that specialize in whatever, we really want to talk to them, right? But coupled with that, knowing the objective of what you want to get out of any given pitch or opportunity, don't miss the opportunity to, present and ask and invite that audience in to sort of support your journey, support your next steps. So I'll be happy to, I can share this pitch. I also sort of prepared copy and paste things here. So just a couple resources if you guys want to check out and like dig into more like pitch templates. I can, share it in the chat, can email it out if any of that is useful. I can also email some of this stuff. It's just like, if you're looking for places to get involved, whether you're interested in working with startups or you have something entrepreneurial aligned yourself that you're looking for resources to help that startup, also happy to sort of share that stuff aligned with you guys. And then that's it. I can go back and address anything we might have glossed over. I can hit on any other questions, or I can, go in whatever direction will be most useful for you guys in the last couple of minutes here. Maybe I'll leave it on that slide so you can browse all the resources.
All right, and thank you for putting those links in the chat too.
So I'm happy to take questions, or as Yana said, if anybody wants to share a little, I know we had a brief opportunity in the beginning. Some of you did share what you're working on. If anybody else wants to share either what they're working on and maybe importantly, what you might be looking for, what would be helpful, what types of resources might be helpful, be happy to, steer you in any productive direction.
Hey, Kelly. Thanks for your talk. Very amazing, very interesting. I am kind of feeling like I want to steer into that direction of startups and stuff like that. And well, one of my big ideas is basically commercializing non-invasive BCIs. Basically, what Neuralink is doing with Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink, but I want to do it non-invasive, and the technology is just not there yet. So I want to know where I could like go to head to that direction, either start on startups or like work on my own thing, learn how to create a company, or like what direction should I like go
Mhm.
from here?
Yeah. And I guess when you say the technology is not there yet, it's like you want to go and do something for a couple of years while just like the technology at large sort of elevates in maturity, and then you can kind of jump into that space, or you personally need to spend years developing the technology before it would be, on a proper commercial path.
Well, that is the question. I
Okay.
mean, I
Either
I
or.
was
Yeah.
thinking of doing just being on the sidelines and then jumping in, but
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
it becomes big, then it'd be harder to jump
Yes.
in, or
Yeah.
so I've been told. So,
Yeah.
maybe continue working on it, but
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if like staying ac in academia would be like the best choice, or if there's some I have to like look around, see what's um
Yeah.
offered.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think, and I'll maybe like generalize for the audience, in case any of you are in a similar boat of being really interested in an entrepreneurial path in general. Um, the, if you kind of look at the career path of a lot of people who have eventually become successful entrepreneurs, a lot of them have worked in a startup before they started their own. So if you're open to, going in a different, maybe a different technology type or subject matter, that could be one strategy that you pursue or you think about is, can I find a job like, just regular job where I get hired, but specifically in a startup company, which like it's worth noting is a completely different experience and just like growth and development opportunity than getting a job in a corporate. Okay. Like you're going to have a completely different learning experience and skill development experience if you work in a startup versus a corporate. So something like that could be a tactic. I think it's a lot harder if you go and work in a corporate and you kind of learn the way of operating in a corporate environment. It's a lot harder than to pivot back into a startup. It's just like the pace, the culture, the lifestyle, like how things operate is very different. But to your point about like this particular technology, if you feel really tied or really motivated by this particular space, then staying in academia, I mean, given like if there are grant funding opportunities, staying in this space and continuing to find ways yourself to advance this technology, that is a really good on-ramp into eventually can you build it, can you develop it, can you mature it, and you be part of that, founding team that actually spins it out of the university. As long as you're patient enough, maybe to spend those years in that remaining deep research. So both are viable options, a little bit of choose your own adventure, but yeah, both very interesting paths.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Uh, yes, hello. Thank
Hi.
you for the presentation. I thought it was like your background is very interesting. So I'm currently working on a startup which is focused on developing patient-specific 3D bioprinted retinal capillary networks to create regenerative therapies that can reverse vision loss in diabetic retinopathy.
Mm.
Um, and I had a question regarding the Life X program, like just as far as like what the requirements are to apply and things of that
Yeah.
sort.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have an accelerator program, and yeah, maybe this is good. If I can, I will maybe email Robbie all of the various links and things that is worth circulating among this group. So I can certainly point you guys to some information on LifeX. But we have an accelerator program that is specifically targeted for fairly early stage startups. So we work with a lot of startups that are like just in the process of spinning out of the university. So you've done enough academic research to kind of validate that like the fundamental science can and will work. You might have a little more work to do to get it into a full product, but you've at least like proven that the underlying science can work. You have enough proof of concept. And it's the accelerator is positioned for companies that are like preparing to go out and fundraise. So you're at this sort of transition point where you're ready to leave the university, you've done a lot of academic research, and you're really trying to figure out now, how do we package and present this to investors? And honestly, like what I just talked to you guys through here today, like we spend 3 months basically with a cohort of companies like very thoroughly hashing out each of those topics so that you can package it all together. Like we help you kind of figure out the substance behind all those things that I pointed out you should say. Easier said than done, I think is like the point here. So yeah, happy to kind of share maybe a flyer on what actually the LifeX Accelerator entails and point you guys to some information. But I also dropped here in the chat, and it's on the screen here. You guys are welcome to email me or set up a Calendly. I put my Calendly link in there. If you want to like sort of quickly touch base with me, be happy to kind of delve deeper into either your specific projects, where, why, and how LifeX might be helpful, or whatever else I can help you guys move anything interesting forward on.
And if you send
Great, thank you.
oh, sorry. If you send any links or whatever to me, I can forward it. Or if you'd like to, you can send directly to this neurodesign seminar at list.andrew.cmu.
Cool.
And then I will approve your message to the group.
Awesome. Awesome. That should work well.
All right. Thanks
Well,
everyone for
yes.
coming. And thanks for bearing with me running this for the first time. I think it turned out pretty well, and I'm would like to see you all again if we kind of extend this in the future and have more types of design commercialization education. So thanks everyone who participated, and thanks again to Kelly.
Yeah. Thanks for having me,
Thanks,
everybody.
Kelly. Thank you.
All right, safe travels for anyone who's traveling.
And happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
And I'll get the talk from 2 weeks ago, but everyone's gone. I'll get them uploaded.
Sounds good.
Hi, Alexis.